Thank you for joining us on this Monday for our church service. If you are watching right now, thanks to Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, or Twitch, you can thank Restream.io, which has the link displayed right now. This is Scriptural Salvation Baptist Tabernacle. My name is Andy. Welcome to my living room. Sitting right in front of me, you have Paul and Richard. Steve is to my right, or to my left. To my right is Grace. Over in the corner is Hannah. Right next to Hannah, right off camera, is my wife, Liz. What? Your friend just called. Okay. Yeah. That's funny. Yeah. My wife, Elizabeth, is right off camera. Maybe Leah is in the swing, and a part of the swing is on the camera, but you probably wouldn't know the difference. And Jay and Sweetheart Doggy are off camera as well. Like I said, welcome to my living room. Starting next week, we're going to be moving back to our 4 p.m. Monday time slot.
Hey.
So, no, this is dance performance is this Thursday. Our dance is over. Jazz band is over. And then when you start marching band, it'll be at 6 p.m. on Monday nights.
Yeah, it's always 6 to 9.
So we're going to do church starting on Mondays at 4.
Until that 1 week in August where it's like 12 days.
We'll figure that out. It's 1 week. So, with that being said, like I said, hopefully you're able to join us. We're going to open up with a song called Morning into Dancing, and morning like crying, not morning like, oh my gosh, it's 6 a.m.
Morning like somebody
is in sadness.
Oh, I know what morning means. I saw it in BitLife. It's a game.
Well,
It's spelled with.
yep. So this word is not holy moly, it's 5 a.m. morning. This is a family member got hit by a truck, and I'm mourning. That's what this morning. What? All right.
That analogy.
Well, we just preferred some. Anyway, whoa. Okay.
That's mean.
Morning into dancing. Oh yeah.
From you.
I forgot to do a sound effect. So this is has a little bit of a Caribbean vibe to it. The song.
Ooh.
So. Okay.
I used to call it
Where there once was only hurt, gave us healing hand. Where there once was only pain, you brought comfort like a friend. I feel the sweetness of your love, piercing my darkness. I see the bright morning sun as it ushers in your joyful gladness. You turn my mourning into dancing again. You lifted my sorrow, and I can't stay silent. I must sing for your joy has come. Your anger lasts for a moment in time, but the memory is here and will be on me for all my lifetime. You turn my mourning into dancing again. You lifted my sorrow, and I can't stay silent. I must sing for your joy has come. Oh, you turn my mourning into dancing again. You lifted my sorrow, and I can't stay silent. I must sing for your joy has come.
All right. Every time I hear that, I think of Harry Belafonte and like the Banana Boat song. Oh, yeah. So that there is Morning into Dancing,
Oh,
and we will continue on our study in Genesis. Now, last week we had a couple weeks before we had started Joseph, and he was going to be our central character, and how he was sold into slavery, and then it did an abrupt stop where it talked about Joseph's older brother Judah and how he wasn't exactly the greatest of characters. And now we're going to get back into where Joseph's story picks up.
Yay.
beep beep.
All right. Okay.
I'm gonna sing for you this time.
And we will be listening to Psalm, or be reading through Psalm number 30, starting with Richard.
Can you let me speak?
You could have spoken, Richard.
That's enough. I will
Extol.
extol you, O Lord, for you have drawn me up and have not let my foes rejoice over me. O Lord, my God, I cry to you for help, and you have healed me.
Okay. It's okay. It's okay. Jay,
O Lord, you have brought up my soul from, was it Sheol or Sheol?
Sheol.
Sheol. You restored me to life from among those who go down to the pit. Sing praises to the Lord, O ye his saints, and give thanks to his holy name.
Force anger for a moment and his favor for a lifetime. Whipping many
May Terry.
may tarry for the night, but joy comes with the morning. As for me, I sit in my prosperity, I shall never be moved.
What? Right, well,
What happened?
Yeah.
I went to the bathroom. Me next. Fire, you made my mountain stand strong.
I
You
do.
made your face. I was displayed to you. Oh Lord, I cry, and to the Lord I plead for mercy.
what profit is there in my death if I go down to the pit? Will the dust praise you? Will it tell of your faithfulness? Hear, O Lord, and be merciful to me. O Lord, be my helper. And
You have turned my you have turned for me my mourning into dancing. You have used my sackcloth and clothed me with gladness, that my Lord may sing your praise and not be silent. O Lord my God, I will give thanks to you forever.
so the reason why we did that song, you have turned my mourning into dancing. So that's where they got the words to that song.
What about the baby? Was it true to say that? Oh, it's oldest youngest. Oh, just stuck it on the gum.
We're going to pick up our story in Genesis chapter 39, verses 1 through 6. Like I said, this is a continuation of Joseph. The,
Do it what?
So are we going for 2 chapters?
yes.
Toot?
All
I say 2.
Well, I heard toot.
right. Children.
Yes.
Genesis 39. Now Joseph had been brought down to Egypt, and Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh, the captain of the guard, an Egyptian, had bought him from the Ishmaelites who had brought him down there. The Lord was with Joseph, and he became a successful man, and he was in the house of his Egyptian master. His master saw that the Lord was with him, and that the Lord caused all that he did to succeed in his hands. So Joseph found favor in his sight and attended him. And he made him overseer of his house, and put him in charge of all that he had. From the time that he made him overseer in his house, and over all that he had, the Lord blessed the Egyptian's house for Joseph's sake. The blessing of the Lord was on all that he had, in house and field. So he left all that he had in Joseph's charge, and because of him he had no concern about anything but the food he ate. Now Joseph was handsome in form and appearance.
Well, believe it or not, if we go back and look,
Oh.
there. It's kind of a strange dangling piece of
Yeah, I'm like,
a verse.
what?
But, okay.
I thought that was going to be like in the next verse.
Okay. So Joseph was the character that we found that he was privileged. He held a place in his father's house where he was his father's favorite. His father had given him that cloak that a special person would wear. No, not the invisibility cloak.
No.
The coat of many colors. But it also could have meant the coat with long sleeves, right? Something that a slave wouldn't wear. It would have wore really long sleeves to establish that he wasn't working out in the fields. His brothers hated him, and they stole his cloak from him and threw him in a shallow pit and sold him off to Arabian traders. And now the Arabian traders made it down to Egypt and sold Joseph to an official in Egypt.
Could I get a music from you?
No, Paul. This official is named Potiphar, He was the captain of the Egyptian guard. He was a high-ranking official, which meant that he had status in the Egyptian court. So at times he had an audience with the pharaoh. Um, he would have been mingling among the Egyptian elite, and there are some older translations that say that this Potiphar, this high-ranking captain of the guard, was a eunuch, but there's no textual evidence to say that he was a eunuch. So that comes into play later. It's kind of strange. The Lord was with Joseph. This is tough for some people because Joseph had it hard right here. He went from being a privileged boy that was tattletaling on his brothers and always went back and told their father everything that they had done wrong, to being left for dead and then sold off into slavery. A lot of people see this, the Lord was with Joseph, as contradictory because they don't think that Joseph having to go through this should have been part of Joseph's plan. But the main thing to get from this is that Joseph was not alone. This was all part of God's plan to have him go into slavery like this, and to go through these experiences in his life. And Joseph became successful in this house of Potiphar. And what this tells us is that, like at his home, where it said that all the brothers were out in the fields being shepherding the sheep, Joseph was at home and got sent out to report on everybody. Here, he's not a petty laborer out in the field working like a slave. He's in the house of this high-ranking Egyptian official, managing everything to do in this household. So Joseph, what it tells you is he has God's favor. God is with him. Everything that Joseph does is blessed, and people recognize that Joseph is a successful person. Now, his master saw that the Lord was with him. And when it came to Abraham, the non-believers could all look at Abraham and see that Abraham was blessed. And that was the same thing with Jacob. They could look at Jacob and see that he was blessed. And what this tells us is behave in such a way that people that are not Christians, not believers, know that there is something different about you, that you have a special
Gift.
a blessing in your life, a God sparkle. You want people to. Also, no matter what you're doing, whether it's keeping an eye on your brothers that always manage to get themselves in trouble, whether it's you're working as a slave, or whether it's doing that job that you hate, or whether it's going to school, always set an example for others to see that you're above letting things get to you. And this is what life is about. This is what God wants us to do. Joseph is a perfect example of, yeah, he had things great in his father's house. He was loved by his father, and his father favored him. But even when that was all taken away from him and he was sold into slavery, he was still in charge of everything in his slave house. He was still given things to control. So he didn't take that and let it bother him and make him say, forget it, I'm not going to try hard at all. It made him try harder. And that's what God wants you to do no matter what you're doing. There's always set an example. Joseph is placed as the overseer of the house. He's in charge of everything. He's in charge of the finances. He's in charge of who comes to visit. He's in charge of the everyday affairs of this Egyptian official, so that Potiphar, the captain of the guard, doesn't have to worry about anything except for what he's going to be eating. So it takes a lot of stress off of this Egyptian official. He can say, listen, I've got this slave who does everything for me. I don't have to worry about everything. Everybody should get one of these things. They're pretty high functioning. I got a really good model of slave here. He's quite the Hebrew. The Lord blessed the Egyptian's house for Joseph's sake. So Potiphar got recognition, and he became wealthy, and things went well for him because of Joseph. So Potiphar felt the blessings of God because he had Joseph in his house, and he knew that Joseph was different because things were going well. Now let's compare that to another character, Jonah, who was trying to run from God, who was trying to get away from God as much as possible. And the people on the boat that were trying to take Jonah away from God knew that Jonah was not believing in God, it was not setting an example, and things were going bad for everybody because of Jonah. So the exact opposite of what is happening to Joseph. Now, Joseph was handsome in form and appearance. Now, Richard, you didn't think that verse fit there.
Yeah.
It kind of doesn't. It's kind of strange how it fits in, why they put it there and not with the next piece. I don't know, but that's something to keep in mind. And where that comes from is his mother was Rachel, who the Bible said was a beautiful person, and his grandmother was Rebecca, who the Bible said was a beautiful person, and his great-grandmother was Sarah, who the Bible said was a beautiful person. So he takes all these good-looking characteristics from his family and lineage. But it doesn't really fit in with, he was a slave working in Potiphar's house, but we'll remember that. Now, we will listen to 39 verses 7 through 18, and we will meet Potiphar's wife. Now, so Potiphar's wife. We will,
Mrs. Potiphar?
I guess you could say Mrs. Potiphar, but nope, I want to say there.
And after a time, his master's wife cast her eyes on Joseph and said, "Lie with me." But he refused and said to his master's wife, "Behold, because of me, my master has no concern about anything in the house, and he has put everything that he has in my charge. He is not greater in this house than I am, nor has he kept back anything from me except yourself, because you are his wife. How then can I do this great wickedness and sin against God?" And as she spoke to Joseph day after day, he would not listen to her, to lie beside her, or to be with her. But one day, when he went into the house to do his work, and none of the men of the house was there in the house, she caught him by his garment, saying, "Lie with me." But he left his garment in her hand, and fled, and got out of the house. As soon as he saw that he had left his garment in her hand, and had fled out of the house, she called to the men of her household, and said to them, "See, he has brought among us a Hebrew to laugh at us. He came in to me to lie with me, and I cried out with a loud voice. And as soon as he heard that I lifted up my voice and cried out, he left his garment beside me and fled and got out of the house." Then she laid up his garment by her until his master came home. And she told him the same story, saying, "The Hebrew servant whom you have brought among us came in to me to laugh at me. But as soon as I lifted up my voice and cried, he left his garment beside me and fled out of the house."
Does he actually believe him? Believe her now?
Oh, well, that doesn't sound good, does it? Okay. So, as before we had said, Joseph is handsome in appearance, and Potiphar's wife wants to seduce him. Now, earlier I had said there's some older Bible translations that say that Potiphar the Egyptian is a eunuch, and the reason why some of these older Bible translations would have gotten that. Yep, okay, dog, sit. Sit down. Sit. Sit. Sit.
Sit.
Come on. Sit down.
Sit down.
You are not listening.
Oh.
But the reason why some of these older translations would have thought that Potiphar was a eunuch was they would have said that he was a high official in charge of Pharaoh's harem. There's nothing in the text that suggests this. There's nothing in the text that says that Potiphar was a eunuch. Potiphar was married. I highly doubt he was a eunuch. And there are some older translations and commentaries where old pastors say that the reason that Potiphar's wife wants to get with Joseph is because her husband was a eunuch, but there's no evidence for this, and it's total bananas. It's nonsense.
It's false.
Yes, it's false, kind of like her accusations against Joseph.
False.
Now, in this day, in ancient Egypt, all the way through basically the Middle Ages, it was the culture of anything goes. As a married woman, she wouldn't have been expected as a married Egyptian to keep her husband. She would have been expected to do whatever she wanted to. And being the official's wife that she was, she was probably used to looking at slaves and going, well, you're a slave, you're going to do what I tell you to do, and the slave not telling her no. But in the Bible, we have a completely different culture where we learned very early in the Garden of Eden that a man and a woman were made to be together as a pair and to be married to each other and not have multiples and everything, because look at how well that worked for anybody that's had multiple spouses here in the Bible, right? That's worked out well for everybody, hasn't it?
No. Pass the blame.
And what Joseph does is he has some restraint. He completely goes against what the culture of Egypt, culture of the Canaanites, culture of any ancient person of the day is, and he has restraint in the sanctity of marriage. How then can I do this great wickedness and sin against God? He's going with the law set down to him in Eden, where there's one man and one woman, and they are made for each other. The wife is persistent because her husband is an important official. Nobody's probably ever looked at her and told her no, so she's just used to getting what she wants when she wants it. Her husband's a rich guy. He's high up in the Egyptian court. They didn't have, in fact, in ancient Egyptian culture, it was often a man would marry his sister. I mean, they did strength. Yeah, they did strength. They had multiple wives, and
That's disgusting.
well, that's what these
That's what they used to do. because
kept the marriage line pure.
they're
That's how you kept the royal blood. It didn't pass out of the family. So these things, what God did was He took the Hebrews of the day and He made them different than the people around them. He said, look at everybody else. They're going to be doing all this stuff, but I don't want you to do it. I want you to have morals and values and to stick to what you believe. But one day when he went into the house to do his work, it's a trap. I can picture Admiral Akbar. It's a trap. Everybody get out of here. It's a Star Wars thing.
Oh, Star Wars.
Yeah, it's a Star Wars thing. They're all attacking the Death Star. And, Admiral Akbar looks like a fish. It's a trap, It's exactly what's happening. It's a trap. She set this up. She knew that the only way that she could get Joseph, if she couldn't have him, she was going to put him in a trap. It says here that none of the other men of the house were in the house, so I think that Mrs. Potiphar took all the other servants and people that worked in the house and had them all leave so that there wouldn't be any witnesses. Now, Joseph is cornered by the wife. He sticks to his morals and won't compromise, but she scared him when there was nobody else in the house, and she grabbed onto his coat and says, "You're going to stay here with me." Joseph just gets scared and runs away, but leaves his coat behind with her. So that's what this text is saying here. And she takes the coat and keeps it with her and tells everybody. She starts screaming, "Hey, hey, hey, come in here." And everybody comes in and she's holding on to Joseph's coat. And she says, "Well, he was in here and he tried to get close to me, but I started to scream and he ran away, so I kept his coat." And this is the lie that she tells. Her thought is because Joseph won't say yes to her, she's going to make his life miserable, so she concocts this plan to lie about him. And as soon as he heard that I lifted up my voice and cried out, now all these other servants would have been outside, and they would have heard her yelling. They would have seen Joseph run out, and they would have come inside, and she would have been holding his coat. So they didn't see Joseph do anything, but the story that she was telling would have fit the events that they saw.
What? Birdie.
What is that?
Paper airplane.
There we go. Not a birdie.
We will listen to verses 19 through 23. Verses 19 through 23.
Huh.
As soon as his master heard the words that his wife spoke to him, "This is the way your servant treated me," his anger was kindled. And Joseph's master took him and put him into the prison, the place where the king's prisoners were confined. And he was there in prison. But the Lord was with Joseph, and showed him steadfast love, and gave him favor in the sight of the keeper of the prison. And the keeper of the prison put Joseph in charge of all the prisoners who were in the prison. Whatever was done there, he was the one who did it. The keeper of the prison paid no attention to anything that was in Joseph's charge, because the Lord was with him, and whatever he did, the Lord made it succeed.
So he's basically living in paradise, basically.
Well, if Paradise was being locked in prison after being accused of adultery, yeah. So his anger was kindled. So Potiphar has his wife sell him this bag of goods story that's full of nonsense and a lie. And because there are no witnesses and there's no proof either way, he gets mad. Now, the Bible doesn't say if his anger is against Joseph or if it's against his wife or if it's a little bit of both. I have this theory that Potiphar's upset because he has this slave that's been doing all this work for him and he hasn't had to do anything. And now all of a sudden, because there's accusations, he has to do something to this slave. He's mad because now he's going to have to work. He's upset at his wife for bringing these accusations to light. Now, I've heard other translations say that his wife had a reputation for going around and doing this kind of thing, but there's nothing in the text that says this. Now, what's interesting is the punishment for adultery in these times was death. So Potiphar could have easily just looked at Joseph and said, all right, now you're going to die. But he doesn't. He takes him and he puts him in to a prison, the place where the king's prisoners were confined. So Joseph was a slave. He wasn't put in the dungeon, the oubliette, the hole in the ground, awful prison. He was put into the place where the king's prisoners were put. Now, this means that, once again, God was with Joseph. I know it's tough for a lot of people to come to terms with, that God was with Joseph, but it kept him from getting a worse sentence to his accusation. But the Lord was with Joseph. He's still not alone. And he takes what he has and he does the best with it. He didn't end up in the Egyptian slave prison. He ended up in the Pharaoh's prison. So, still better than nothing. The warden takes Joseph and puts him in charge of all the other prisoners. So, the inmates here are running the asylum. Joseph is in charge of all the people that are in prison with him. That's still better than being in the slave prison or being beaten or put to death. I would say that's a step up from being put to death. The keeper of the prison paid no attention. He sees God in Joseph. And this is a theme that we see here all through Joseph's life, is he does the best in every situation that he's placed in, no matter how bad it is. Joseph succeeds. Again, he sets an example for everybody in any situation that he's in. Joseph went from a privileged home where he wasn't working hard and he was favored by his father, and he tattletaled on all his brothers, and he was sold into slavery. He becomes the best slave there ever was, and he's great at it, and that can't happen, so he's imprisoned. He's thrown into prison, and he becomes an honor inmate, and he runs the entire jail. I'm sure there's a lesson hidden in here somewhere. Morals. Stick to your morals, what you know is good, what you know is right. And it's better to be blessed in prison and have God on your side than to be the king of an unbelieving nation. Do the best with everything that you have, like Joseph does, and don't let anything get you down, and try your hardest. Paul?
Oh, airplane.
No.
Paper airplane.
No. That's an origami bird.
Oh my god. That time that was a bird.
Verses 40, or chapter 40, verses 1 through 8. All right. Stick with us. We're almost done. Second chapter, 40, verses 1 through 8.
Genesis 40. Sometime after this, the cupbearer of the king of Egypt and his baker committed an offense against their lord, the king of Egypt. And Pharaoh was angry with his two officers, the chief cupbearer and the chief baker. And he put them in custody in the house of the captain of the guard, in the prison where Joseph was confined. The captain of the guard appointed Joseph to be with them, and he attended them. They continued for some time in custody. And one night they both dreamed, the cupbearer and the baker of the king of Egypt, who were confined in the prison, each his own dream, and each dream with its own interpretation. When When Joseph came to them in the morning, he saw that they were troubled. So he asked Pharaoh's officers who were with him in custody in his master's house, "Why are your faces downcast today?" They said to him, "We have had dreams, and there is no one to interpret them." And Joseph said to them, "Do not interpretations belong to God? Please, tell them to me."
Okay. Dreaming.
Did I have something like that before?
Ah, but very similar, yes. Okay.
Nebuchadnezzar, where he had dream of the statue.
Very good.
What about the dream of the stairs? Or
The ladder, Jacob. Okay. So sometime after this indicates that there are years that Joseph is in prison. We don't know how many. And then two more officials of Pharaoh get arrested, the cupbearer and the head cook. A cupbearer is a person that serves the Pharaoh or the king their wine. And the reason they did this was it would also be the official wine taster to make sure that the wine wasn't poisoned. So this was a very important job. You had to be a trusted official to become the cupbearer, because if somebody was trying to poison the king, you would be the one that would die. So this guy's arrested. The head cook is also a trusted person, because he's the person that deals with the Pharaoh's food. He has access to something that could kill the king, right? So this person also has to be trusted. So these two people are very important, trusted officials. We aren't told their crime, but we can assume there was probably a poisoning plot. Somebody tried to poison the Pharaoh, and these two are the ones that get thrown into prison for it, because they would have been close enough to actually make this plot go through. They're put into the same prison as Joseph. Now, in the last chapter, we talked about Potiphar as captain of the guard, but in this chapter, it just says he's put into the captain of the guard's prison, who is not named. So maybe Potiphar retires, he moves on, there's a new captain of the guard. Doesn't matter. It's not important.
Alright, well.
Joseph, the model inmate, it says, and he attended them. So even when Joseph is in charge of the prison, he's serving people and doing his best as the honor warden. But normally when you take an inmate in that position and give them that much power, they let it go to their head and they abuse other people, but not Joseph. Joseph so far is rock steady, sticks to his guns and his morals, and does everything to the best of his ability. He's a very upright character. They continued for some time in custody, and one night they both dreamed. Years pass. This cupbearer and head cook, they're in prison, it's years, and all of a sudden, both of them have vivid dreams. Now, to Egyptians, dreams are important. But there are other times we've seen in Bible stories where dreams are important. You mentioned Nebuchadnezzar. Daniel interpreted dreams. To these two Egyptians, they both see dreams and they're both troubled.
Oh, okay.
The one thing that Joseph's brothers called him was the dreamer, because he had these dreams of his brothers all bowing down and worshiping him, and he tells it to his brothers. Kind of a bad move.
That kind
But-
of
Yeah,
a really bad move.
yes. But so here it is years later, and he's going to take this dream interpretation ability that he has, and he's going to put it to good use. And he looks at him and says, "Do not interpretations belong to God? You don't need a sorcerer or a special Egyptian priest. I can tell you what God wants to tell you in these dreams. And in my note here, I say compare this to Daniel, because Daniel said, it's not me that's giving you the interpretation of these dreams.
It's
I will
God.
pray to God Almighty, and He will give you the interpretation of these dreams.
It's God.
Yep. And listen to verses 9 through 19, which will actually give us what these dreams were that were so troubling to these officials.
Okay, Daddy, what's sneaking off
Yep.
camera?
40 verses 9 through 19.
What's sneaking to the microphone?
Aw.
So the chief cupbearer told his dream to Joseph and said to him, In my dream there was a vine before me, and on the vine there were 3 branches. As soon as it budded, its blossoms shot forth, and the clusters ripened into grapes. Pharaoh's cup was in my hand, and I took the grapes and pressed them into Pharaoh's cup, and placed the cup in Pharaoh's hand. Then Joseph said to him, This is its interpretation. The 3 branches are 3 days. In 3 days, Pharaoh will lift up your head and restore you to your office. You shall place Pharaoh's cup in his hand as formerly, when you were his cupbearer. Only remember me when it is well with you, and please do me the kindness to mention me to Pharaoh, and so get me out of this house. For I was indeed stolen out of the land of the Hebrews, and here also I have done nothing that they should put me into the pit. When the chief baker saw that the interpretation was favorable, he said to Joseph, I also had a dream. There were 3 cake baskets on my head, and in the uppermost basket there were all sorts of baked food for Pharaoh. But the birds were eating it out of the basket on my head. And Joseph answered and said, This is its interpretation. The 3 baskets are 3 days. In 3 days, Pharaoh will lift up your head from you and hang you on a tree, and the birds will eat the flesh from you.
Oh, sounds
It's like a zombie movie. Yay! Zombie movie.
No.
okay.
Oh,
Yeah.
oh.
The cupbearer has a dream where he dreams of vines and grapes, things that are familiar to him. He's the one that serves Pharaoh his wine and tastes it to make sure that the Pharaoh isn't being poisoned. The 3 days motif is common in the Bible. Jonah's in the belly of the fish for 3 days. Jesus is in the grave for 3 days. It's all over the place. 3 days. So here they are in prison, and in 3 days they're going to be standing before the Pharaoh. This is common in the Bible. And in 3 days, he had Pharaoh's cup and gave him wine to drink, his old job back. So all of this to the cupbearer, he can look at it and get excited about it. Yet he could kind of see these things that were important to him, but he didn't know the pieces of the dream and what they meant, and Joseph interprets them through God. In 3 days' time is what the 3 vines mean. And this takes the cupbearer and it gets him excited. He knows that he's going to get his old job back and he's going to be important in Pharaoh's court again. Now the baker sees that things are going good, and well, his dream was something good. My dream has to be good because it's kind of similar. And he dreams of baskets and baked goods, things that are familiar to him.
Remember me?
Now, the remember me is, remember Joseph looks at the cupbearer after he interprets the dream for him and says, after things are good, go tell Pharaoh who I am, and so that I can get out of here. It has nothing to do with the baker. I couldn't fit it on that line. See how that works?
Oh,
And the baker, being a cook in ancient times, is familiar with keeping pests away, like birds that would be flying in the air trying to eat the food and fly away with it while he was cooking it. So he has this dream of all these baskets on his head and the birds coming in eating the bread. And Joseph looks at him and says, Pharaoh will lift up your head from you. Now, I always had this picture of like Pharaoh's just going to pick his head up and carry it around, or maybe stick it on a pike somewhere. Or,
Dad, don't go too far.
oh,
but Pharaoh is going to hang this baker. Each have 3 days to wait. So what that means, it begs the question: is Joseph good at what he does? And in later on in Egypt, when there are prophets, they test the prophets, because a prophet would come out all the time and say, God will do this in so many days, and if the thing happened, it meant that the prophet was good, and if it didn't, they would take them and stone them, because being a false prophet would get you killed. And this is exactly what Joseph does. He says, there's a short amount of time, this specific thing is going to happen to these two different people. It was in their dreams. He's having a prophecy. This is the prophet test. We'll finish off the chapter.
with Genesis 40,
20 through 23, right?
20.
Okay.
We went to 32 minutes, now it went to 52.
On the third day, which was Pharaoh's birthday, he made a feast for all his servants, and lifted up the head of the chief cupbearer and the head of the chief baker among his servants. He restored the chief cupbearer to his position, and he placed the cup in Pharaoh's hand. But he hanged the chief baker, as Joseph had interpreted to them. Yet the chief cupbearer did not remember Joseph, but forgot him.
Oh, so close. So close. Joseph is forgotten again. He's left in prison. Oh,
Cliffhanger.
cliffhanger. Oh, kind of. We got the resolution of that story. So, it's Pharaoh's birthday. It's time to feast. Bring out all the servants. And remember, take those two clowns that I threw in prison all those years ago, the old chief baker and the old cupbearer, and bring them out for this feast. What always struck me is he takes the cupbearer and the baker out of prison for this feast, but he leaves Joseph in there, even though Joseph was this wonderful administrator in Potiphar's house, and he's the honorary warden of the prison. But the reason that Joseph isn't brought out for this feast is these two, the cupbearer and the baker, were involved in a plot, I feel, to kill the Pharaoh, and the Pharaoh wanted to have this big extravaganza and reveal what the investigation, what the results were. He was going to serve justice to these two clowns at his feast.
Clowns up.
No.
Now, the cupbearer, just like in his dream, goes back to serving wine to the Pharaoh again. He's restored to his old position. So, being that close to the king, he obviously wasn't the one that tried to initiate the plot to kill him. The baker, on the other hand, is hanged, just like he was told in his dream by Joseph. We can compare this to a dream that Daniel had, where he says to a different king in Babylon. This is the writing on the wall.
No.
You're going to be taken over. That wasn't Nebuchadnezzar. That was to a different king.
Okay.
Can't remember his name right now. Not that important. But this one, they have. So the scene is they're in Babylon. They're getting invaded, and this writing gets written up on the wall, and everybody's staring at it. And they don't know what it means, and they bring Daniel in, and he looks at it and he says, "You're going to be taken over. Everything is over. It's curtains for all of you." And they go, "Wow, you've interpreted this dream. It's so great." They hold this feast for him, and then the army comes in, and they get taken over by the Persians. The baker has this dream, and it's interpreted to him that he's going to die, but he still knew that it was coming. So this is very similar to that event there. Even while in prison, while being held wrongfully, Joseph is a model prisoner. He is a dreamer. He makes the best even out of a terrible situation. We don't know how long he's in this prison because the cupbearer doesn't remember Joseph like he had asked him to. Joseph is again wronged. Compare Joseph to Jesus. Both of them were wrongfully imprisoned. Both of them had something to do with a 3-day period until they're proven right. And both of them, neither do they complain while all this terrible stuff is happening to them. Now, Joseph went from being favored in the house to becoming a slave to running the slave master's house to being put in prison to running the prison. He doesn't complain about it, whereas Jesus was arrested and beaten till almost death, and he didn't complain. So, but that's what we're getting here. That's the theme we're going with Joseph, is that he's a forerunner to what Jesus would be like. Make the best out of all the situations that you're in.
Now,
And we will finish off with the song "Knowing You."
So you have to make the best when you're at a funeral. What do you do there? What do you make the best of it?
We'll talk about it.
See, when you're going to sing the song.
Okay.
If you want us to.
All right. So.
Is it easy?
All right, everybody. I hope we've learned some lessons so far in the life of Joseph, because his life is not over yet. We haven't finished with his story. It will continue next week. There's more. Do the best, even if you're taken and put into prison wrongfully. Do your best, even if you're made a slave and you shouldn't be. Go to your work and work hard, even if you don't like your job. Set an example for others. Let them see Jesus through you. Don't complain about what your life is. Remember, next week we're going to go to our 4 o'clock time slot on Monday. Next week is June the 20th, which just also happens to be our 18th wedding anniversary.
Wait, it is?
18 years. Yes, your mommy and I have been married. And with that, we will see you all next week.